Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Desert Highlands Baptist Church and the Midweek Recharge. We're in the Gospel of John, written by the Apostle John, and we're in the 4th chapter, the meeting at the well. This is the Samaritan woman and Jesus. And if you look on a map, you'll see at the time, you'll see Judea, and then you see Samaria right on top of that. And then right even with the Sea of Galilee, if you mark it over from the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, and then the Sea of Galilee, all to the west, essentially, of the Sea of Galilee, that is known as the Galilean area or the Galilean cities. And so what we're going to hear about is a story that takes place with Jesus in Samaria. Now, the way that they would usually go, and I'll explain a little bit about the issue with the Samaritans. We are aware that there's a problem. We kind of go back to the story of the Good Samaritan, and nobody thinks badly about being called a Good Samaritan now, but understand that a Samaritan, being called that or being thought of that way, that wasn't a positive thing. That wasn't a compliment. And so the Samaritans don't like the people from Judea, from Judah. The people from Judea don't like the people from Samaria, and there's a specific reason for that. But just as you're looking at the map, Jesus needed to go, in our story today, he needed to go from Judea up to Galilee, and had to go through, you would have to go through that territory of Samaria. But actually, the Jews would stay out of Samaria. So what they would do is basically head along. They would cross over the River Jordan and head north along the eastern shore of the Jordan River, then cross back over into Galilee after they had crossed that area. They would just stay completely out of there. Well, Jesus is going to tell us that he has to go through Samaria. We're going to understand why, because he has an appointment. He has a divine appointment, doesn't he? He knows who he's going to meet, and that's really the subject of our story today. So we're going to start here, verse 1 of chapter 4, and just to give you an idea of where that is that's going to be taking place here, the meeting with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. Now, verse 1. Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, meaning John the Baptist. Verse 2, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. Verse 3, so he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. So that area of Galilee that's to the west of the Sea of Galilee, just imagine as you're looking at the map, the Sea of Galilee and all the way to the west, that goes all the way really to the Mediterranean Sea. That's really the area called Galilee, or the area of the Galilean cities. That's where he's headed. But of course, he has a divine appointment right through the middle of Samaria. So why is going to Samaria so terrible? Well, this is of course a time with the split kingdoms, the 10 tribes of Israel that made for Israel. They are, because of sin before the Lord, they are captured by the Assyrians. And the Assyrians take control of that entire area. The offspring between the people of Israel and intermarrying and having children with the Assyrians are the Samaritans. They are of mixed race of Assyrian and Jew. And so the Jews actually look down upon those children of mixed race. And so they're called the Samaritans. Now, when Judah, of course, just as sinful, was captured by the Babylonians throughout the pages of history, when Babylon finally releases them and sends them back, they're allowed to go back and kind of rebuild society in Judea and Jerusalem. They go back and really, they really don't embrace the Babylonian culture. They don't embrace mixture with the Babylonians in having children and getting married and that. So they don't do that the same way that the northern kingdom does with the Assyrians. And so what happens is they kind of develop this hatred for the offspring of the mixture of the Jews and the Assyrians. So what you have is the Samaritans, and then the people of Judea, the people of Judah and Jerusalem, that have great hatred for one another. This is why the story of the Good Samaritan is so poignant, because it is the least likely person to stop and help the Jew. Remember the story of the Jews that actually discover this man who's been hurt. This Jew has been obviously robbed and beat up and severely hurt. And 3 different Jews pass over and are not the least bit interested in helping out for various reasons. It is the Samaritan that stops and helps out. The parable of the Good Samaritan. Well, what makes it so incredibly unlikely is the fact that the man who actually stops is a Samaritan. There would have been great hatred between the Samaritans and the Jews. The Jews hate the Samaritans because they are a reminder of compromise. And the Samaritans hate the Jews because they are looked down upon because of the Jews. So here's two groups of people that truly hate each other, even though there is a common lineage. So our story today takes place right in the middle of Samaria, this divine appointment that God has, that Jesus has with this woman at the well. So he leaves Judea in verse 3 and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. That's the curious verse. He had to go through Samaria. Anybody at the time would have said there's no need to go through Samaria. In fact, the Jews avoided it like the plague. They didn't want any part of going through there. They knew the kind of hostility that they had for one another, so they would avoid it. But Jesus is not avoiding it. Verse 5, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Verse 8, his disciples had gone in the town to buy food. And again, the town that is close by there is Sychar. And Sychar is really the hometown of this woman, but understand it's about a mile away from the well. The well is centralized so that many different areas of the city can all come to get to it. But this woman, most scholars estimate, lives about a mile away. That's not a big deal if you're driving. It's certainly not a big deal if you're riding an animal. But if you're walking, and if you're hauling water in a large pitcher, that's a lot of work, and that's quite a bit of an effort. It's estimated that the people who are drawing the water, usually the woman of the household, would take 2 trips every other day. So what they really would do is come and fill up their stone pot that they had inside the house. They would go to the common well, they would draw water a couple of times every couple days so that there was fresh water for sanitation purposes and for ceremonial washing, because although the Samaritans and the Jews didn't like each other, they all had the common belief system. In fact, Samaria, we're going to see actually the Samaritan woman pay a reference to it, but Samaria had its own temple because they believed in Yahweh. They believed in God. In fact, they were awaiting the Messiah. We're going to see that from the Samaritan woman as well. His disciples had gone into town to buy food, and so this Samaritan woman comes out to the well so that she can draw the water. Well, in response to Jesus, she says in verse 9, a Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman." She's saying, "Are you crazy? Why are you even talking to me, man? I'm a Samaritan woman. You're a Jewish man. And in fact, we are not associated with one another. This is dangerous conversation. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews, and this is the note that's put here by the Apostle John, the author, for Jews do not associate with Samaritans. So her confusion is understandable. And her worry is also understandable, because it's, if Samaritans see me talking to you, I'll be in trouble here in my own town. And if Jews see us associating, there might be a problem for me as well. Verse 10, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Now, this would have been a very confusing statement. Have you ever heard somebody say something off the cuff that you went, "Huh? Excuse me?" That's what's going on here. Jesus says, well, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Now, this reference to living water is a double reference, what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the purest water, living water. That the term living water here really refers to flowing water. It's the difference between a stagnant pool of water, which is risky. It can contain disease. It may not be the healthiest of water. People around the world, about a third of the world's population, drinks water that is not healthy for them. It's a very scary thing. We in the United States, we don't have a concept of this. All we have to do is walk up to a faucet and turn it on. The poorest of us have relatively clean, flowing water that comes out of the faucet. Not true for about a third of the world. Still, it has common water sources that are stagnant, not terribly healthy. Well, if you're out in nature, the difference between a stagnant pool of water and a living water source would be a flowing source. because flowing water has the capacity to stay cleaner. Because the contaminants, things that dirty water, well, they are kicked off of water that's flowing. So living water would have been understood, at least the physical sense, by the Samaritan woman. But Jesus is also talking about a spiritual side here too, isn't he? He's talking about living water, meaning water that will sustain. He's not talking about water at all, is he? He's talking about something that will sustain someone the one and only time they have to partake, right? So living water in the spiritual sense, this is water that I will never have to replenish again. That would have been attractive to this woman. Verse 11, Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Now, comparing and contrasting on the physical side, we're looking at a well, a deep well. Now, that would have been relatively clean, but at the same time, it is a stagnant water. And so it's much different than a living water, which would have been even cleaner. Now, this would have been relatively clean by comparison, but living water would be better. And she says, what's this source of living water? You're not even carrying a pitcher. How would you get this water? So she's thinking very literally. And of course, Jesus is talking about something much different. Verse 12, are you greater than our father Jacob, she asks, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? We're going to get into an idea of the temple as well. The Samaritans were just as religious, just as faith-embracing as the Jews were as far as Jehovah God and Yahweh God. In fact, many of the priests in Samaria would have actually adopted the Jewish religion and actually changed some of the details so that they embraced it themselves. They even argued that the temple in Samaria was the superior temple, when we know that's not true. Actually, the temple in Jerusalem was the appropriate temple. But yet, they were embracing it themselves, so they, we're even seeing here where she is communicating her knowledge of what the Samaritans say about faith, about true knowledge of the scriptures and what Jacob promised. Our father Jacob, she says, right? Jacob, who would be Israel, the people of Israel. She's owning that as a common ancestry with the Jews, which really is appropriate if she was a religious Jew, of course. And as did also his sons and his livestock. So she's owning this part of her history. Verse 13, Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. He's referring to the well. You pull this water out, you drink it, you're going to be thirsty again. In fact, I have knowledge that you come back on a regular basis, as does the town, right? This is the common source of water. Only wealthy people had their own well in those days. Usually they were sharing from a well that was common to the town. So everyone who drinks this water in this well, madam, is going to be thirsty again. And what I offer is something different. Verse 14, but whoever drinks the water that I give to them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So Jesus is talking about a renewal of the Spirit. Remember what he said in the previous chapter to Nicodemus. He's talking about that a man or a woman who chooses faith in God, they must not only be born of water, they must be born of the Spirit. They must be born again. He's talking about the very same thing in a living water context. Water that you will no longer be thirsty for, because this is a one-time forever thing. Friends, in choosing to follow Jesus Christ with your life, that's a one-time decision. You don't have to keep making that decision over and over and over and over again. Now, it's good for us to be introspective, to assessing our Christian life on a regular basis. It is a daily decision for you and I to follow Christ with our life. However, that's a one-time for all decision where I choose to call myself a sinner, as the Bible describes me, as someone who needs the rescue, the grace of God. Lord, please come into my life, take over, forgive me of my sins, and cleanse me of all unrighteousness. That's a one-time decision, and he does it. And whoever calls on the name of the Lord, he will be saved. He or she will be saved. Well, Jesus is referencing that. He's referencing it in the context of himself. I bring a living water that you must only taste once, and it forever cures your thirst. What is the thirst he's talking about? A continual hunger for something that is missing in your life. Well, what's missing in the life of the average human being? What's missing in the life of a person is freedom. freedom from the chains of sin. This woman is going to be revealed as someone who has a very checkered past. And she's going to be able to identify with what Jesus is talking about in terms of what she has done with her own life. Verse 15, the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." She says, "Well, I'm interested in this. This is hard work coming here every couple of days, dragging back water from the well. This is several hours every single week that she's got to just take water from the well and put it in the pot at home so that she and her family can have access to it. So this is hard work. Hey, sign me up for this." She doesn't really understand what Jesus is talking about, of course. But of course, Nicodemus the Pharisee didn't understand what Jesus is talking about. So we don't need to be terribly critical of this ordinary woman, this Samaritan woman, with this sketchy past we're about to see. She didn't understand, and then the mighty Nicodemus, the Pharisee, the man of God, he didn't understand what Jesus was talking about either. So there's a general cluelessness here about the need for God to rescue them from themselves. Verse 16, he told her, "Go call your husband and come back." Now the tone is going to change just a little bit, because now we're touching something deep. We're getting to the heart of the matter here with this woman. Verse 17, "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say that you have no husband." Verse 18, "The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." Now you wonder about this tact with Jesus. And you and I might come at this a little differently. That's why we're not God, right? He knows exactly what he needs to say. But he almost puts her on the defensive. He immediately declares that he knows her past. He doesn't have to know this woman. He's never met this woman before. But yet he knows her past. He knows just how scandalous a life that she's led. Now, you and I in modern day America, we're going to say 5 husbands? Okay, maybe she lives in Hollywood. We have no idea, okay? 5 husbands would not be terribly scandalous in America today. Nor would be a woman living with a man and she's not married to him. This is not thought of as scandalous behavior. In fact, quote-unquote mainstream America would even advise people to go and move in together and get to know each other and decide whether or not that you want to get married. This is kind of a mindset that people actually adopt as being the right thing to do as opposed to being sin. See how Americans are so good? People are so good at turning sin on its head and making it seem right, making it seem proper. Well, not terribly scandalous in our day, unfortunately, but would have been incredibly scandalous in her day. And probably fairly well known in the town. In fact, even the Samaritans would have looked down upon her for her history. Probably is well known that she has had 5 husbands, and she doesn't want any other people to know. And she's living with a man who is not her husband. That would have been incredibly scandalous, even for the Samaritans. For the Samaritans, I should say. I keep saying Samaritans. I mean the Samaritans from Samaria. Okay? Verse 19. "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet." Hey, there's a no duh. Well, I can see that you have extra perception here. So I see you're a prophet. I see I'm about to get a lecture. I think I'm getting less and less interested in this conversation. You can feel her start to pull away. Great. Here's a prophet of God. I'm about to get lectured on my behavior again. And I'm not looking forward to this. Verse 20, "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain," she says, "but you Jews," this is a critical spot for her, "but you Jews, you judgmental Jews," she says, "you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. We all know this to be wrong, but you Jews, who are terribly judgmental, you say the only proper place is to go down and worship in Jerusalem. The problem with that is you judge us down there, so we're not about to go down there." In fact, it was quite understandable, although not exactly what the Lord would want, because it is proper. The only proper place was for where the temple actually was. You weren't to do this. I mean, the Old Testament's very, very clear. They weren't supposed to. The people of God were not supposed to perform the rites. We're not supposed to perform sacrifices. We're not to do their temple business away from the temple. In fact, it almost was civil war at the time of the conquest of Canaan. Remember when the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh decided to build a little memorial temple, not temple, but a little stone kind of memorial piece on the west of the Jordan to just say, God provided for us. And as they moved back over, the Western powers, the Western tribes were saying, wait, you're setting up another place for sacrifice. How dare you? They just assumed, right? That almost led to civil war at the time of Joshua. Well, just imagine the resentment that's felt about having an alternative temple. But you kind of understand, if the Jews make it absolutely impossible for the Samaritans to come down there, why would they want to come? They're going to set up an alternative spot, and that's exactly what they do. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Verse 21. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You know what? Jesus doesn't care. Because Messiah has come, he doesn't care where they're worshiping in the temple. You see this? Does God care which church you actually worship in? Doesn't care one bit. As long as it is a Bible-believing, truth-teaching location where Jesus Christ is honored. That's what God cares about. For you who believe in Jesus Christ, the marquee on the outside of a church is not important. What is important is what happens on the inside. Who is praised on the inside? With what words were used in what songs? Is the Bible taught authentically, without opinion? Is God worshiped authentically? Are people accepted for who they are? Is sin accepted and tolerated, or is it preached against? Right? These are marks of the true place to be worshiping. Jesus really doesn't care about the temple at this point because he has come. The ultimate revelation of God has come. Messiah is here, and so worship with the sacrifices, all that is going to be put to an end anyway. So what does Jesus say? Believe me, a time is coming when you don't have to worry about this mountain or Jerusalem or where you're supposed to go to meet God, because God will be inside of you if you choose to follow Jesus Christ, if you choose to follow me as Messiah with your life. That's what he's telling him. Verse 22, you Samaritans worship what you do not know. You're pretty clueless, although the Jews are too, Jesus is beginning to say. We worship what we do not know, for salvation is from the Jews. Verse 23, yet a time is coming and has now come, because he says, well, I'm here. So a time is coming, I have now come, when true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in the truth. And they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. So God will be no longer concerned about where you worship. He's concerned about who you worship. He's not so concerned about the nuts and bolts of how you worship, what you bring as far as your sacrifice, that you bring a sacrifice. For Christians now, we don't have a sacrifice that we have to bring for sin. What do we bring to God? We bring ourselves. We sacrifice our time, our resources. Every good and perfect thing comes from above. And so we happily give back our time, our material, our resources, our availability, so that God can use us in a powerful way. It is no longer the rites of sacrifice that will purify us before God, because the Messiah has come, and he has come to be, as John the Baptist said earlier in the book of John, behold the Lamb of God, here to take away the sins of the world. This is the great news that he is delivering to this woman. Although she feels judged at the moment, he is saying, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to provide a way of escape, a way of rescue. And a way of rescue that has been emulated by others, God has lifted up. In fact, in the book of Judges that we're looking at on Sundays, God will bring up a judge who is a redeemer on small scale, small r redeemer. And that person will do, he and men and women are raised up through the book of Judges for the purpose of rescuing the people of Israel for a time. Jesus came to rescue the people of Israel and then the rest of the world for all time. And he's here to announce it. He's telling this woman, isn't it ironic that one of the first people that know the plan, the arrival of Messiah, is a Samaritan woman who the Jews would have called unclean. Not just a Samaritan woman, but a woman with a checkered past of sexual immorality. How dare she know about Messiah? Just imagine what the Jews would have said if they really believed that Jesus was who he said he was. Verse 24, God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. How do we worship the Lord? We worship him in spirit, because that's how we've been rescued. You know, this body will decay. This body will fall apart eventually, but the spirit that has been renewed in me and renewed in every Christian out there will live for eternity. We'll spend eternity in the presence of God in heaven. So we worship him in spirit, the eternal part of who we are. We worship him in spirit and in truth. The truth of what's been revealed with Jesus' words is that he is here to take on the sins of the world. And those 5 husbands that she has had before, that she has been sexually immoral with this man that she is currently living with, all that will be swept away as long as you simply believe in me. Believe on the name of the Lord Jesus and you will be saved. Why? Because Jesus committed no sin of his own. Jesus is one with the Father in heaven. Jesus was the creator of all, and he lived a perfect sinless life to be here, to be the ultimate sacrificial lamb, the ultimate sacrifice that takes away our sin. As he said when he hung on the cross, it is finished. I've done what I've come to do. And that is to take away all of the eternal consequences for sin. So now there is nothing in the way between man and God, living forever in peace and harmony together. What a beautiful picture. And he's sharing this with a Samaritan woman. Verse 25, the woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, and Christ is just the Greek name for Messiah, the Messiah that's coming, I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. So she says to the Messiah, well, I know Messiah is coming. You use a lot of words here, Jesus, but I know Messiah is coming, and eventually he'll explain all of this to us, and it'll make sense because we believe that Messiah is coming. You think this woman is close? She's very close, isn't she? Because she believes in Messiah. She believes that one day God will come. Now, she may have the same distorted view of Messiah that the rest of Israel, the rest of Jerusalem, the rest of the Jews, and also the rest of Samaria actually believes as a Samaritan woman. But she believes in Messiah, and so there is a place to begin. Verse 26, then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. He reveals himself as the Messiah. I am one that you can trust, he says. I'm not simply a prophet. I am the Messiah. So the conversation in the previous chapter with Nicodemus, the Pharisee, the one who should know better. In fact, Jesus asked, don't you know these things, Nicodemus? Aren't you a teacher of the law? He should have known better. This woman who doesn't know, who's been told double messages and complicated messaging with resentment mixed in between the Samaritans and the Jews about which site is proper and who actually was the chosen people, the Jews or the Samaritans. You know, just tempered by all this hatred for one another. So the confusion that was built in with that, and thinking herself as complete, and it would have been backed up by the Jews that despised her nationality, that despised her previous history, as if they didn't have any sin history themselves. All complicated by things that just didn't matter. As Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. What a beautiful picture from chapter 3 to chapter 4. A mighty Pharisee of the Jews and a lowly Samaritan woman with a poor background of sexual immorality. That guess what? That message of life, of forgiveness, of grace and mercy is for both. Not only for both of them, but for everyone in between. Symbolically, of course, the Pharisees were symbolically completely thought of as being holy and without sin. We know that's nonsense. Of course, they had their own sins. But from the seemingly holiest of people and the seemingly lowliest of people, that salvation was for all in mankind. This is the beauty of this whole entire book by the Apostle John, because he makes it clear. He makes it clear that all were welcome in the kingdom of heaven and that Jesus came to save everyone. First to the Jews, and then to the Gentiles. as the Jews were to broadcast the good news. Eventually, they would become good at that. But they started off a little rough. For the lowest of low, for the highest of high, according to human traditions, all needed Jesus. All needed to be rescued. Well, thanks for joining us. That's chapter 4 of the Gospel of John. And it's just going to be a great time going through this book, seeing Jesus for who John wanted us to show. He wanted us to see this, that God in the form of man came to us because we could not possibly get to him on our own. So Jesus, in the form of man, the incarnate Jesus Christ, God the Son, here walking among us and delivering the best of good news. Well, friends, we hope you'll join us for the 7 p.m. replay of this exact Bible study. Join us for live interaction and content. I'll be there live with you, answer your questions, and have conversations with you. Also, join us at 9 a.m. on Sundays as we continue our study verse by verse through the book of Judges. 9 a.m. on 11th Street West in Palmdale, California. We hope you'll join us. It's been a good time together. We hope you see you tonight as well at 7 p.m. Thanks for joining us and have a fabulous week.